Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @ CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION @CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 10th of September 2025, from the business section. Ministers urged to support investment to help Scotland win the space race. This article is by Jodie Harrison. The UK government should move away from ad hoc grants and commit to a sustained investment strategy if Scotland is to win the space race, a Westminster committee has said. The Scottish Affairs Committee has called on ministers to move further and faster to help Scotland establish itself as a leader in space launch. Scotland is well placed to become a key player in the growing small satellite launch sector and is home to 5 of the UK's 7 developing spaceports. Saxavord in Shetland is at the most advanced stage of development. A report from the committee said the country's geographical advantages and existing satellite manufacturing sector give it an advantage over European competitors and mean it could offer end-to-end launch service. However, Scotland's launch sector faces fierce competition from other countries, particularly from Norway. The committee warned that Scotland's first mover advantage is in danger of being lost due to low government investment compared to other European countries. This puts Scotland at a competitive disadvantage and could hinder the UK's ability to capitalise on the growing space economy, the report said. The committee said that once launch had been achieved, the UK government should become an anchor customer of Scotland's launch providers to ensure their long-term financial viability. The report outlines how this would send a clear signal of confidence and stability that the sector needs to scale and attract international customers. The report also emphasises the importance of space launch capabilities to national security and defence readiness. MPs on the committee urged investment in Scotland-based launch sites to develop the UK's sovereign launch capabilities and reduce reliance on foreign providers, recommending that defence priorities should be integrated into the launch sector. Patricia Ferguson, chair of the Scottish Affairs Committee, said, "Scotland has real potential to become a leader in space launch, with spaceports such as Saxavord in Shetland are well placed to seize. The economic benefits of this would be huge, but it's a time-sensitive opportunity we are in danger of missing. We are urging the UK government to commit to sustained financial backing of the sector and move towards long-term, coordinated investment that can match the fantastic ambition and momentum demonstrated by the sector. Our report sets out ways to do this that can not only provide the confidence and clarity that the industry really needs to scale up, but also position the UK as a serious contender on the global launch stage." Scott Hammond, CEO of Saxavord Spaceport, welcomed the SAC report, saying he broadly agreed with its conclusions and recommendations. He said, "I have been saying for a long time that government needs to up its game and get more fully behind the satellite launch sector, which, with 10,000 small satellites expected to be launched in the next decade, is as exciting a new growth opportunity as any." Other countries, such as Norway, and this is a truly international playing field, have provided much more financial support to their sovereign launch capabilities, and we need to follow suit in order to gain a significant share of a market that will be worth $28 billion and secure assured access to space for the UK. It is particularly pleasing that the committee recommends that the UK government should broaden its funding approach and become a long-term customer of, as well as an investor in, domestic launch services. This should be for both civilian and military satellites. I also welcome the committee's recommendations in relation to the MOD, which it insists should integrate defence priorities into the launch sector, which provides that secured UK access to space, and prioritise the procurement of homegrown responsive launch services. He added, "Very few places have the geographical good fortune to become launch sites, but Saxavord is one of these and is well established in terms of infrastructure and licensing, with a first test flight on the near horizon. We look forward to working with Ian Murray as the new minister with responsibility for space and others within the reshaped UK government to move forward for the benefit of the sector and the country as a whole." That article was by Jodie Harrison. This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday, the 10th of September 2025, from the Voices section. The police should arrest criminals, not comedians like Graham Linehan. This article is by Callum Steele. The decline in police standards has been slow but steady, and the service is a long way from sorting itself out, as the arrest of Graham Linehan over anti-trans tweets shows, warns Callum Steele, a former General Secretary of the Scottish Police Federation. One of the things that is often forgotten about the Commissioner of Police of the Metropolis, simply the Met to most of us, is that the current incumbent, Sir Mark Rowley, was coaxed out of retirement to run it. Although commented on briefly at the time, the fact not one of the other serving 44 chief constables across the whole of the United Kingdom was deemed of sufficient quality to step up to the plate to become what is dubbed the UK's most senior police officer really should have been subject to much greater critical scrutiny and debate. Whilst policing is one of those subjects everyone is an expert in, the politics of policing, as opposed to political influence over the police and allegations thereof, is altogether much more niche topic. But indulge me here, for this matters, and it matters more than anyone in government or the wider world cares to admit. What on earth are we meant to conclude from the fact that a man who had put himself out to grass some 4 years earlier was held in greater regard than any of those overseeing the day-to-day response to crime and community safety across the whole of the United Kingdom? What does that say for the talent management, a hideous term in its own right, of the future leaders of our constabularies? And what does it also say for those who are meant to bring out the very best from them? Frankly, not a lot. And when mediocrity, for that's what we are talking here, suddenly finds itself in positions of supreme power, We can't really be expecting that mediocrity to pursue standards and abilities it was either incapable of recognizing or achieving in the first place. That is not to say the chief constables of yesteryear were flawless beings bestowed with impeccable judgment, not least as many of them helped lay the foundations for the mediocrity of today. But taking ownership of their own leadership and operational decisions was something few of them shied away from. The decline in policing standards has been slow but steady. It's been subtle and has coincided with the gradual move away from the things we all know as crime to a form of policing of morals and attitudes ahead of actual behaviors. That shift has been most evident over the past few years as the irreconcilable nebulous concept of gender clashed with the reality of sex, and the police inexplicably decided to spend more time dealing with hurt feelings than they did hurt bodies. There can be little doubt that on that particular issue, the police service in Scotland was a most enthusiastic advocate, and the damage it caused to its own reputation as a result has been severe. Despite this, and the recent Supreme Court ruling on what a woman is, the service continues to punch itself in the balls, more on that shortly, as its failure to shut down the illegal disruption of the blaring noise to drown out the Let Women Speak rally at Parliament last week shows. What is all the more disappointing is that the decision makers in this madness are anonymous. They are hidden from view, and it is the ordinary officers who are left to face the indignation of knowing the answers to the questions they are rightly being asked, whilst being handcuffed in responding to them. 2 days earlier, Father Ted writer Graham Linehan was arrested at Heathrow Airport for what is frankly BS. The police were used as a tool for score settling and either lacked the wit to see that or were enthusiastic participants in doing so. Whichever is true, neither is good. Anyone seriously claiming his post expressing exasperation at the erosion of women's only spaces, which concluded, if all else fails, punch them in the balls, was inciting violence simply needs their head read. Any police officer who genuinely believes the same should be shown the door, as such a flagrant lack of comprehension is inherently problematic for anyone able to deprive someone their liberty. The notion no senior officer was aware of the decision to arrest Mr. Linehan is frankly risible, given the numerous layers of policing that would have been involved. Quite simply, 5 armed officers should have had more important things to do than arrest a man for some words on X. The fact they didn't is purely down to senior decision-making. Whilst the Commissioner of the Met was quick to come out and suggest that his officers were in an impossible position because of Parliament, this largely and possibly deliberately misses the point completely. The truth is his police service, like every other in the UK, has fostered an environment where Stonewall law has been given greater credence than real law. It's all very well bleating about how terribly unfair it is on the poor Met, But where were his concerns in 2022, 23, and 24, when literal assaults on women's groups were considered fair game? Where are his concerns that a man has been arrested out of vindictiveness or weakness? Where is his leadership in giving direction to his officers on how to deal with such piffle, and crucially, his support for their use in discretion if they label it so? Police Scotland may well have finally escaped the quagmire of the policing of words, largely as a result of the dog's breakfast it made of its messaging on the hate crime legislation and a very public challenge to be arrested by J.K. Rowling on the run-up to its implementation in April last year. But it is struck by the same crippling fears that infects the Met. It is the same inherent weaknesses that saw the arrest of Graham Linehan that led to a crippling inaction against the disruption of the Let Women Speak rally. It is pervasive and promoted by ambivalence. When Scottish ministers decided not one of its own officers was good enough to lead the police service they created, and the Home Secretary not one out of 44 other chief constables was up to leading the Met, the signs are not good that policing is capable of sorting itself out any time soon. That article was by Callum Steele. This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday, the 10th of September 2025, from the Voices section. The real reason behind John Swinney's surprise mission to the US. This article is by Alison Rowett. Scotland's First Minister, John Swinney, embarked on a flying visit to the US to push for lower whisky tariffs. But there was more to this transatlantic trip than met the eye. If anyone had a smidgen of doubt that campaigning for the Scottish Parliament elections has begun in earnest, the news that John Swinney was on a plane to America would have erased it. Not to be confused with the Mr. Smith who went to Washington to fight corruption. Mr. Swinney was in D.C. to push for lower whisky tariffs. The announcement was timed so that the local TV news bulletins could lead with the story that he was en route. How glamorous. I'm John, fly me. You do wonder why he has launched himself into this shuttle diplomacy. Certainly, it's an important issue. The Scotch Whisky Association says the current 10% tariff is costing the industry £4 million a week in lost exports. But the tariffs were announced months ago. What happened to make Mr. Swinney decide he had to jump on a plane right now, like some international peace envoy or disaster relief coordinator? The answer lies in the not-too-distant future, when the US President arrives for an unprecedented second state visit. What seemed a bad idea when Sir Keir Starmer handed over the invitation now looks like a terrible one, given the changing circumstances of both leaders. Where to begin? Let's start with the pachyderm in the room, Andrew. The Trump visit is taking place just as the Epstein scandal ignites once more, with the release of the now infamous birthday book, complete with greetings from Peter Mandelson, who called Epstein his best pal, and others. The book, part of a cache obtained by the Democrats, also includes a sketch allegedly from Mr. Trump. He denies drawing a picture or signing one. In going to Washington, Mr. Swinney was seeking to get ahead of next week's presidential visit, prepare the ground for any eventuality. While he might be a tad jet-lagged at FM cues, will anyone notice? The First Minister's visit to DC is a win-win for him. If tariffs are lowered, he can claim the success. If nothing happens, at least he tried. He got on a plane. But what did he find on arrival? Only His Majesty's ambassador, Lord Peter Mandelson, waiting to greet him. The FM was due to stay at the ambassador's residence in the UK Embassy, with Mandelson accompanying him to the White House to see the president. With the ambassador's name all over the US media, the event may have a bigger than expected crowd of reporters present. When Mr. Trump visited Scotland in July, the big news was the Justice Department interviewing convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell and the possibility she might get a presidential pardon. That took care of a lot of the media questioning. Mr. Trump could also steer questions away from Epstein and Andrew by claiming to be on a private business visit to his golf resorts. But next week, the president will be journeying into the very heart of the British royal family. He and Melania are staying at Windsor Castle as the guests of the king. The president could, of course, be kept away from a microphone for the duration of his visit. It is only Wednesday to Friday, slightly longer than a Swinney drop-in, but not a full week, so that might be possible. But he has already been denied the chance to address both Houses of Parliament. By sheer coincidence, the Commons is in recess that week. He might start to smell a rat and think he's not welcome at all. The visit could scarcely have come at a worse time for Keir Starmer. Nominations for Deputy Party Leader close tomorrow, with voting starting October 8th. What better way for a candidate from the left to attract attention than by slating the president's visit while he is here? None of this, I'm sure, entered Mr. Swinney's head as he settled down with a glass of fizzy water and an unfeasibly small packet of peanuts. Nor will he have lost any sleep over the fact that he is stealing a march on the new Scottish secretary. Wee Dougie Alexander can hardly complain, can he? There is reason to believe Mr. Swinney rather fancies his chances on whisky tariffs. During the last Trump visit, the First Minister said he and the President had a good old blether on the subject. But once the President was on the plane home, he appeared to have forgotten all about his new Scottish pal and his concerns, telling reporters, "I didn't know whiskey was a problem. I'm not a big whiskey drinker, but maybe I should be." It was the first time I've heard Mr. Trump making a light-hearted remark about booze. He hates the stuff. It killed his older brother, Fred, at the age of 42, though the official cause was a heart attack. Hearing the president speak about his loss casts him in a whole new light. Gone is the boorishness so often on display, and in its place is a different, kinder, more sympathetic man. With Mr. Trump, of course, one never knows what kind of Donald is going to turn up. He changes position depending on the last person he spoke to. The itinerary for the state visit has been designed to keep him away from the public as much as possible, but protests are planned and they will annoy him. As for John Swinney, the president appears to have forgotten all about the First Minister's endorsement of Kamala Harris. I'm beginning to think he has mixed Mr. Swinney up with someone else, or he's just so relieved it's him and not Nicola Sturgeon he's dealing with. He will forgive a lot. So, everyone can now relax and enjoy the lavish state visit we're all paying for. What else would we spend all those lovely taxes on? Cheers. That article is by Alison Rowett.
This is from the Herald on Thursday, 11th September 2025. From the News section. Record 36,900 employed in Scottish space and defence sector. By Andrew Lermont. Scotland's aerospace, defence, security and space industries have surged since the pandemic, according to new figures. Their trade body is now urging both the Scottish and UK governments to provide clarity and support to secure long-term growth. ADS said the sectors added £3.7 billion to the Scottish economy last year, a 55% increase on 2020. Turnover reached £9 billion, up by a third over 5 years. The data also shows record employment, with 36,900 people directly employed across the industries in Scotland, including 2,000 apprenticeships. Employment in the defence sector alone has risen by 2/3 since 2019, with 16,250 people now working in the industry. Productivity across the four sectors has increased by nearly a third to £100,000 per worker, almost half again the UK average. In aerospace, output per worker has surged by 93% to £140,000. Warwick Malcolm, director of ADS Scotland, said the industries were not only economic drivers, but also key contributors to innovation, skills development and regional prosperity. He said, the strategic importance of aerospace, defence, security and space to Scotland cannot be overstated. There is now a real opportunity to build on this momentum through the appropriate resourcing and support. It is vital that both governments provide the clarity and certainty needed to secure the long-term prosperity of our industries. Scottish Secretary Douglas Alexander said the figures underlined Scotland's importance to the UK-wide defence and aerospace sectors. He said, world-class Scottish skills, expertise and innovation are key drivers in the success of the UK's defence, security, aerospace and space sectors. The UK government is committed to ensuring that Scotland continues to be at the forefront of those industries through record investment and our 10-year industrial strategy. According to ADS, the defence and space sectors each now contribute £1.3 billion to the Scottish economy. The figures come as the UK government moves ahead with its pledge to spend 5% of national income on national security by 2035, with a 3.5% allocated to core defence and 1.5% to resilience and security. That article was by Andrew Lermont.
The Herald on the 12th of September and the Voices section. Scotch Whisky, Big Picture as John Swinney appeals to Donald Trump by Ian McConnell. Scotch Whisky has been in the spotlight on the global stage with John Swinney raising the issue of US tariffs with Donald Trump. Business editor Ian McConnell looks at the big picture. Scotch Whisky has certainly been in the global spotlight this week. First Minister John Swinney's appeal to US President Donald Trump to remove or reduce the 10% tariff on Scotch imports to the US has understandably attracted much media attention. It remains to be seen what happens following what Mr. Swinney described as a constructive discussion. However, the First Minister's emphasis on how a zero-for-zero approach on tariffs would help distillers in Scotland and the US seems like a fair enough pitch. Outlining the discussions with the US President in a LinkedIn post, Mr. Swinney said, Scotch whisky is not only vital for our economy, it is truly a unique product. It can only be made in Scotland. In my conversations with President Trump, I pressed the case for reducing US tariffs in our whiskey industry, an approach also backed by American producers. He added the US is not only the biggest market for Scotch, but Scottish distillers also invest hundreds of millions of dollars each year in bourbon casks from Kentucky, with exports to the US valued at almost £1 billion in 2024. The sector's contribution to our economy is immense. Without independence, the powers over trade and tariffs ultimately rest with the UK. But I'm determined to do everything possible to protect and champion this iconic Scottish industry. The dynamic between the Scottish and UK governments on their representations to the Trump administration on tariffs on Scotch whisky is interesting here. Mr. Swinney, although he made his point about independence in his LinkedIn post, appears to be working in partnership on the Scotch tariffs move with the UK government, which is responsible for negotiating trade policy. Another dynamic that is attention-grabbing in this context is that between the UK government and the Scotch whisky industry. The Scotch Whisky Association industry body has been lobbying at full tilt on the thorny subject of duty on Scotland's national drink ahead of the UK budget in November. A hike in duty on whisky in the incoming Labour government's first budget on October 30 last year resulted in friction, to put it mildly, between Sir Keir Starmer's administration and the Scotch industry. The Prime Minister's previous pledge to back Scotch producers to the hilt was swiftly raised by the SWA. Mark Kent, Chief Executive of the SWA, declared in the immediate wake of his last October's budget, "This duty increase on Scotch whisky is a hammer blow, runs counter to the Prime Minister's commitment to back Scotch producers to the hilt, and increases the tax discrimination on Scotland's national drink." On the back of the 10.1% duty increase in 2023, which led to a reduction in revenue for HM Treasury, this tax hike serves no economic purpose. It will damage the Scotch whisky industry, the Scottish economy, and undermines Labour's commitment to promote brand Scotland. Sir Keir then pledged earlier this year to fight tooth and nail for Scotch whisky on the US tariff issue. And that was by Ian McConnell.
From the Herald, Monday, 15th of September 2025, Sports section. Robertson, Liverpool fight and nearly joining Atletico Madrid. By Blair Meikle, digital sports journalist. Liverpool vice-captain Andy Robertson is not ready to sit on the sidelines and relinquish his position as first-choice left-back without a fight, after admitting there was a chance he could have left for Atletico Madrid in the summer. The 31-year-old has been displaced in the starting lineup this season by £40 million signing Milos Kerkez, 10 years his junior. He was briefly linked with the move to Atletico, coincidentally Liverpool's first Champions League opponents on Wednesday, but opted to remain at Anfield for the final year of his contract, despite knowing he was most likely going to be a backup. Robertson came off the bench 38 minutes into the 1-0 win at Burnley, which extended Liverpool's 100% record to 4 matches, as head coach Arne Slot was concerned Kerkez, already on a booking, was in danger of being sent off in what has been a scratchy start at his new club. The Scotland captain, who played in the recent draw with Denmark and win over Belarus, brought an immediate improvement down the left side to provide a reminder he is far from his spent force. Asked whether there was a chance he could have been lining up against the Reds for the Spanish visitors on Wednesday, Robertson said, "Maybe at one point. I do want to play games and be the starting left back, and I have to keep pushing to try to produce the levels I know that I can. The international break was good for me. I was able to get 290 minutes, get that match fitness and 2 really good results for Scotland, and I took a lot of confidence from that." He, Kerkez, is only young, and I think we forget that. You try to help him as much as you can. You want to put pressure on, and then you want to play games. He will be in the starting left back for Liverpool in the future, and it's up to me to push him this season and help him improve. He just needs to keep working hard and not let today affect him, which it won't, as he's a confident lad, and I'll help him as much as I can. Kerkez shares similarities with Robertson in that they both made a step up from non-league clubs to join Liverpool, and the Scot, who himself made just 3 appearances before December in his first season as then manager Jurgen Klopp integrated him slowly, admits the change can be daunting. It's a massive jump. I came from Hull, he's come from Bournemouth, and it's probably quite similar, he added. There are a lot more eyes on you at Liverpool than at those 2 clubs, and Kirk he's transitioned well. There's a lot of information and a lot of different ways of playing, and he just needs to keep going and keep his confidence. I've no doubt that in future he will be a fantastic left back for Liverpool, and that is the main thing. That article was by Blair Meikle. From the Herald, Monday, 15th of September 2025. Sports section. Hearts Schadenfreude as bin fires engulf Celtic, Rangers and Aberdeen. By Stephen McGowan, sports writer at large. Hearts must be enjoying this, laughing up their sleeves at the bin fires engulfing 3 of the biggest rivals in acrid black smoke. This time last year, the Tynecastle outfit were the butt of the jokes. They drew against Rangers on the opening day of the season before losing 8 games on the bounce. Europe felt more like a burden than a blessing. The first anniversary of Stephen Naismith's sacking falls next weekend. On pulling the trigger, Chief Executive Andrew McKinley claimed there was little evidence of any potential upturn in fortunes. There's evidence now, all right. There was a point on Saturday when the Hearts' travelling support revelled in their first Ibrox win since 2014, taunted Russell Martin with chants of sacked in the morning. They had barely made it through the first course when the Rangers supporters joined in. Martin must have known there and then he was done for. No wins in 5 league games leaves a fragile, clueless, frightened team languishing 10th in the league. For a net spend of 20 million, the return, a single win against Alloa, has been appalling. Instead of the old firm title race Rangers fans hoped for, all there is now is a race to the exit between Martin and his Celtic rival, Brendan Rodgers. 1 minute the former Scotland defender is throwing his players under a routemaster to save himself. Next minute Rodgers comes roaring back with an incendiary "sack me if you dare" message to the Parkhead board. Martin responded by dropping his best player, Nico Raskin, losing 2-0 to Hearts and finishing his 100th day as Rangers boss, wondering if he'd ever see another one. When a former Rangers PR man threw open the press conference to fan media, he reflected the rapid change in the social media landscape. If he thought the move would generate a succession of softball questions from friendly faces, he failed to factor in times like this, when the post-match interrogations feel like a firing squad lining up to take aim at a sitting duck. Martin now admits that his team looks scared, at the very point when Rangers should be taking advantage of some iffy displays on the other side of Glasgow. They don't look up to it. Frozen by nerves and anxiety, the manager's determination to make an example of Belgian international midfielder Raskin only increased the level of vitriol pouring down from the stands. The new owner must have heard the boos on the 18th hole of his Philadelphia golf course, and you'd pay good money to know what Andrew Kavanagh and the 49ers investment group are thinking now. Even if they accept that hiring Martin was a misstep, absentee landlords have no difficulty dodging the flak and the shrapnel when they're 3,000 miles away. They might even view the clamour to sack a new manager as absurdly premature. In any other football environment, they'd have a point. Glasgow is a landscape where patience is a weakness rather than a virtue. Those Europa League ticket packages won't sell themselves, and a robust Hearts team are unlikely to fold like a pack of cards, as Aberdeen did last season. So long as Martin is in charge, Rangers face a struggle for second, never mind first. Even Bloom's data algorithm couldn't have seen that coming this soon. A Rangers crisis would normally have Celtic fans swinging from the chandeliers. In a twist to the usual rules of engagement, both sets of supporters are united for once by disgruntlement. The Parkhead board must have hoped that fan protests over a dismal transfer window would amount to a bit of noise, a banner or two, and a period of détente, followed by a comfortable win in Kilmarnock. Some hope. Manager Brendan Rodgers is now so closely aligned with the mutinous fan base, he could have pitched up at Rugby Park 12 minutes late. While he stopped short of identifying the individual he suspects of briefing against him in a national newspaper, he expressed his respect for controlling shareholder Dermot Desmond and praised good guys Michael Nicholson and Chris Mackay, while conspicuously admitting the club chairman. The deep throat of Dalmarnock, whoever he is, made a monumental misjudgment. Far from tilting the axis back in the board's direction, the wicked whispers accusing the manager of engineering his own exit backfired. Desmond could take some of the toxicity out of the situation by siding with his manager, handing him a 3-year contract. While Rodgers claims to be open to that idea, he must know that a cautious Conservative board are too long in the tooth, too set in their ways to change their transfer strategy now. The ace negotiators who think the best deals are done in the final days of the window would still be there, selling their best players without adequate replacements, low-balling clubs with £1.5 million offers and signing 2 left wingers in the final days of the window in the hope that one of them might be able to fill a hole on the right. While Sebastian Tunique looks a player, it's hard to say the same yet of Michael-Ange Balaswisha. A team which used to rip opponents to bits now gives off 1994 vibes. Their first goal in 236 minutes came from Dyson Maeda, and when a thumping header from David Watson pulled Kilmarnock level, Stuart Kettlewell's team looked more likely to win it. VAR handed Celtic a last-ditch penalty for one of those handball calls almost nobody agrees with. Kelechi Iheanacho swept a contentious penalty into the net for a victory more difficult than it might have been if they'd spent a little more of that £80 million burning a hole in the bank. Still, when free agents are scoring late winners, why bother? It's not just Glasgow where the smell of Cordite lingers in the air. Aberdeen's Jimmy Phelan has won 5 of his last 31 league games, losing 18. His team have failed to score in their opening 4 games in the Premiership, dropping points at home in the 2 teams promoted this summer. While the Pittodrie board would prefer to give the Swede 3 years to turn things around, they've gone the extra mile to back their manager, and so far the only reward is relegation for him. It's one of the oddities of Scottish football book that when Aberdeener hearts hit hard times, the others seem to thrive. Tony Bloom has boldly promised to break up the old firm duopoly, and as the Data Kings of Scottish football ride high in the league after a ray of Ibrox sunshine, unrest and discontent grips Rangers, Celtic and Aberdeen. The schadenfreude within Tynecastle must be delicious. That article was by Stephen McGowan. From the Herald, Sunday, 14th September 2025. Sports section. The Enhanced Games is fast approaching and the roster is growing. By Susan Eaglestaff, sports writer. Suddenly the Enhanced Games feels very, very real. Until this point, the Enhanced Games had something of a cartoonish feel to it. Very few athletes had signed up, and the vast majority of the commentary around its existence was disparaging. The criticism was predictable, given what the Enhanced Games is. It is, in short, a sporting event in which anti-doping rules are thrown in the bin, and athletes can take pretty much whatever substances they like in order to improve their performance. With the only sports included in the programme of the inaugural Enhanced Games, which is slated to take place in May 2026, are swimming, sprinting and weightlifting. It's not going to be even close to an Olympic-sized event, and prior to this week, the list of athletes who've signed up to be part of the Enhanced Games was extremely short, with the highest profile being former Australian swimmer James Magnussen, who's a former world champion but retired from swimming back in 2019. So given these factors, it's little surprise that the Enhanced Games was seen at best as little more than a gimmick. Despite its small scale and lack of star power though, critics have remained vociferous about the dangers of allowing athletes to dope and the damage of the event's existence, what it does to clean sport. In the space of one announcement made earlier this week, the slant in the Enhanced Games has changed entirely. Ben Proud, is one of Britain's best ever swimmers. He's been in the GB team since 2013. Career highlights include 2 world titles, 3 European titles, and an Olympic silver medal, the latter one as recently as last summer. As a person, by all accounts, Pride is reserved, quiet, and the most unlikely possible candidate for the Enhanced Games. Yet this week, Pride did what no one saw coming. He announced he joined the Enhanced Games, which is the brainchild of the Australian businessman Aaron D'Souza. Pride's initial statement talked about his intrigue in testing the boundaries of what's physically possible, but it soon became clear that much of these initial mutterings were not quite the whole story about why he joined the Enhanced Games. Within 24 hours of Pride announcing he had signed up and simultaneously ended his professional swimming career, the real truth as to his motivation began to emerge. He did it, in short, for the money. Certainly the money on offer is not insignificant. If Pride can better the current official world record of 20.91 seconds held by Cesar Cilio Filho of Brazil, he'll pocket $1 million. And it has to be assumed he's on a healthy retainer too, so it's big money. Pride's argument is that he dedicated his adult life to being an elite swimmer, and he's left it with very little financial security. There are frustrations, Britain being one of the very few countries that doesn't offer any sort of bonus for winning a medal at the Olympics, the 30-year-old told the Times. It just becomes this kind of outdated system where we as athletes are meant to do it for the joy of the medals. And that is true, we do. And we receive huge support to get there. But there's no monetary value if you perform well at the Games. To be honest, it came as a bit of a shock to me a couple of months after the Games that actually there was nothing. The lack of financial reward is an interesting gripe for Pride. I don't know a single athlete who got into sport, particularly a sport that's considered minority, for the money. Never once in becoming an Olympian did I even notice the lack of remuneration, never mind moan about it. Most athletes feel the same. But despite this lack of desire for most athletes to make fortunes from running around a track, cycling in a circle, or swimming up and down a pool, this doesn't negate the point that Olympic athletes, more often than not, finish their careers in an extremely precarious financial position. Swimming is not Premier League football. It's not tennis, nor golf, nor even athletics. You know you're very, very unlikely to end your swimming career as a millionaire or even well off. So there's part of me that empathises with Pride's financial complaints and his desire to make enough that he can support the family he and his wife want to start in the near future. Within a year or two of being part of the Enhanced Games, Pride will have the financial security that he has so craved during his professional career. So in that respect, his decision is understandable, if not justifiable. But at what cost has this financial security come? A huge cost is the answer. Pride instantly has trashed his legacy. He may not be breaking any laws. The drugs he'll be taking are only banned in elite sport. They're not illegal. But this single decision has now clouded literally everything else the Englishman has done in this sport. And it's also made some observers now question how clean he was as an athlete. If he's willing to put these drugs into his body now, although Pride has skirted around the question of what exactly he'll take to enhance his performance, can we be certain he wasn't doing any of it when he was competing? No, we can't. And then there's the safety aspect of how can taking a cocktail of performance-enhancing drugs be considered entirely safe, even though Pride insists his programme will be monitored closely by medical professionals. So the Englishman may be taking a few quid, but he's losing out in so many other areas as a result of this decision. From the Enhanced Games point of view, they've got exactly what they wanted from this announcement: a heap of publicity, a considerably more attractive product, and a truly world-class athlete on their roster. The saddest thing about Pride's move is that it doesn't lend the Enhanced Games an air of legitimacy. With no big names signed up, the Enhanced Games was a toxic product. Now, with Pride joining, the whole thing suddenly becomes far more legitimate. My guess is that before next May, and as a direct result of Pride's participation, more than a few high-profile names will join the Englishman on the roster. I'm not as enraged by the enhanced games as some others who believe the enhanced games is a threat to clean sport. I see it more as a separate entity that, while pretty distasteful, also carried with it considerable intrigue. Certainly the more names of proud ilk who sign up, the greater global interest there'll be in the event next year. I remain ambivalent to the existence of the enhanced games, but what I do dislike intensely is the message that's being sent to young athletes. If you want to be an Olympic champion, then great, go down the professional route. But if you want to make money, then it has to be the enhanced games all the way. It's not a choice that should be having to be made. Perhaps this will force elite sport to take a look at itself and realise that without the athletes, the sport is nothing, and maybe paying them a few more quid is both manageable and wise. That article was by Susan Eaglestaff.
From Herald, Scotland, 8th of September 2025, from the STEM section. The Glasgow University talking head helping refugees feel at home. Article by Jodie Harrison. Displaced people seeking to start new lives in Scotland could be helped to settle in the country with the support of a new social robot in development at the University of Glasgow. Human-robot interaction specialists and linguists from the university have teamed up with a Glasgow charity to explore the potential of AI-powered interactive robots to help refugees and asylum seekers access information and support in their native languages. Using a robot modelled to look like a human head, which can listen to questions and provide spoken answers, the system aims to remove many of the barriers which can prevent displaced people from easily accessing support and the services they're entitled to use. The development of the system, believed to be the first of its kind to be co-designed in partnership with refugees and asylum seekers, is being led by Shaul Ashkenazi, a PhD student at the university's UKRI Centre for Doctoral Training in Socially Intelligent Artificial Agents, Social AI CDT. He has been volunteering at the Central and West Integration Network, CWIN, a Glasgow-based community organisation which offers support to migrants for more than 2 years. With the support of staff and service users at CWIN, he has developed a prototype system built around a robot head made by Furhat Robotics. It is capable of interacting with users in both modern Standard Arabic and English, and in the future could provide access to a custom-built database of local services like food banks, libraries and healthcare providers in its responses. Insights from focus groups held with CWIN service users will be showcased as a paper presented at the 2025 International Conference on Social Robotics and AI in Naples, Italy, later this week. Mr. Ashkenazi said, Scotland hosts about 16% of the UK's population of Syrian refugees who arrived here under the Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Scheme, with around 650 currently awaiting asylum decisions. They can face a wide range of challenges on their journey to becoming new Scots, from language barriers to an incomplete understanding of the support they can access. Working with CWIN as a volunteer helped show me how much help and support is required to help people start new lives in Scotland. As a researcher interested in how we can build systems which enable useful interactions between humans and computers, I was keen to explore how we could use emerging technologies like large language models and human-like robots to augment the support already available from groups like CWIN. The development of the prototype was guided by a collaboration with 9 Syrian refugees and asylum seekers who received support from CWIN. The study's participants, 3 women and 6 men aged between 31 and 48, took part in discussions about their experiences of living in Scotland and the challenges they have faced. The discussions were held in Arabic by Rawan Srouers-Raik, a co-author of the paper, and another PhD student at the Social AI CDT, in order to help the participants express themselves as easily as possible. The study participants highlighted a series of shared issues, including access to housing, language barriers, and challenges in understanding and navigating the various support systems available to them. Then, the team introduced the participants to the Furhat robot and demonstrated its capabilities by showing it answering questions about tax exemptions in Arabic and English. The team also gauged the participants' responses to different potential gender presentations for the robot by dressing it in a wig and hijab, then in a beard. They felt that a system which could help them access services in their own language could be helpful in the future, and that speaking to a robot rather than a person could help overcome the embarrassment that can arise from discussing personal problems. They also suggested that the robot could be made even more inclusive by adding support for Kurdish, another language often spoken by Syrian refugees and asylum seekers. Mr. Ashkenazi said, "This study shows that there is a willingness to engage with a social robot and that there is potentially real value in expanding the prototype we've created. There's still work to be done to create a fully featured system which will include expanding the languages that the robot is able to use. Thanks to the feedback of our study participants, we're working on integrating support for Sorani Kurdish and Persian, languages which are also spoken in Syria and by people from other regions which CWIN also help to support. We'll continue to work with CWIN to test the prototype as it develops in response to continued collaboration with the people we want it to help. Our hope is that social robots like these will be useful sources of support in the years to come." Florence Dioka from the Central and West Integration Network said, "CWIN was set up in 2009, based in Glasgow city centre. We receive refugees and asylum seekers from all over the city and beyond to access services. At CWIN, we run services that address our community's immediate needs and offer a wide range of opportunities, including weekly English for speakers of other languages classes, weekly access to community food pantry and community meals, well-being activities, and a drop-in service where community members can access information, advice, advocacy, and other one-to-one support. The robot's ability to interact directly with our community members in their native language will help them to navigate the different support systems and facilitate their integration in Scotland." Professor Jane Stewart-Smith and Dr. Mary Ellen Foster of the university co-authored the team's paper, along with Professor Gabriel Skantze of Furhat and the KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. The team's paper, titled "Participatory Design for Human-Robot Interaction with Syrian Refugees and Asylum Seekers," will be presented at the 2025 International Conference on Social Robotics and AI in Naples, Italy, on Thursday, the 11th of September. And that article was written by Jodie Harrison. From Herald, Scotland, 13th of September 2025, from the STEM section of the business section. Tech review. You won't miss this smart alarm in a home emergency. Article by Sean Dimmock. Xsense XH02M heat alarm. What is it? A smart heat alarm designed to detect dangerous levels of heat rather than smoke. Good points. The device meets Scotland's building regulations due to its interconnectivity capabilities. It can wirelessly link up to 24 other alarms in the same M-series range via a base station. This means if one alarm detects danger, then all interconnected units sound together, giving you wider coverage and more time to react in larger homes. The alarm is loud and reaches a minimum of 85 decibels, ensuring you won't miss it in an emergency. It also has a wireless range of up to 500 metres in open air, which is especially useful in bigger properties. When connected to the accompanying smartphone app, you gain access to real-time alerts, remote testing, silencing, and even the ability to share access with other household members. This visibility gives peace of mind when you're away from your property. A built-in sealed lithium battery provides 10 years of power without needing a battery replacement. If connected to the SBS 50 base station, it gives up to 7 years of life. Bad points? The smart features require purchase of the SBS 50 base station, otherwise you just have a basic alarm. Best for those with existing Xsense fire alarms wanting to quickly comply with building regulations regarding heat sensors in kitchens. The app gives complete visibility to those who are absent from the property often. Avoid if you need smoke or carbon monoxide detection in one device. It's also not the most budget-friendly option once you factor in the cost of the base station. Score 8 out of 10. Xsense XH02M heat alarm, £26.99 from amazon.co.uk.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday the 16th of September 2025 from the Voices section. A child racially attacked in my neighbourhood. What have we become? This article is by Neil Mackay. A schoolgirl in Newton Mearns has been assaulted in a reported race hate incident. Columnist Neil Mackay says this is evidence that bigoted violence is now part of everyday life. Place has a powerful hold over the human heart. A familiar street, a once-loved home, an old university quad, the beach where you first swam in the sea. These little patches of the planet shape us. The mere memory of the riverbank where I fell in love with my wife makes me miss her with an intensity that hasn't abated over the 30 years we've been married. Memories of place signpost the childhoods of my daughters. There's a suburban street in Glasgow's Newton Mearns which vividly brings their school days to mind. Harvey Avenue is nothing special. It's the definition of suburban Scotland, bungalows and trees. The primary school and high school my daughters attended is around the corner. Just as that riverbank represents the first flush of lasting love, Harvey Avenue represents the innocence of childhood, the joys and struggles of young parenthood. On the school run, we'd park in Harvey Avenue. After parents' nights and Christmas concerts, we'd walk back to the car, holding our daughters' hands. I haven't really thought about Harvey Avenue in a long time. My daughters are grown up, starting to think about one day having kids themselves. But when it does cross my mind, when I drive past that little street every so often, I think of sunny days, kids running out of the gates at home time, and laughter, lots of laughter. I've romanticized a simple suburban street into an almost Spielbergian setting. It's a metaphor for idealized memory. Today, though, that silly wee street, which really means nothing much to anybody but the folk who live there and some soppy parents like me, isn't so idealized anymore. Like many places today, which many people must love and hold memories of, deep in their hearts, it's been defiled by hate. A child was attacked by a man on Harvey Avenue because she was Muslim. The girl was walking home from school. Police are treating it as a hate crime. It's emerged that this isn't the first such incident to happen on Harvey Avenue. Another 15-year-old girl was previously assaulted. I've felt a horrible, colliding mix of emotions since I learned of these attacks. If I knew the families of the young girls, I'd reach out to them directly to offer friendship and support. If I could get my hands on whoever did this, I'd struggle to keep myself on the right side of the law. I'm no cosseted suburbanite. I grew up in rough times and in rough places as a kid in Northern Ireland. Years as a crime reporter taught me that cruelty and abuse are no respecter of class, colour or creed. I have seen and experienced more than my fair share of violence. But a schoolgirl attacked in public on a Monday afternoon in broad daylight, and all because of the colour of her skin and her faith. What have we become? And for it to happen on a street which brims with children at that time of day, such ugliness wearies the soul. These offences are happening everywhere now. In England, a man has just been arrested on suspicion of raping a Sikh woman in a racially motivated attack. I struggle to understand what's gone wrong with this country. There's a line from The Tempest which reads, "Hell is empty, and all the devils are here." That's increasingly how I feel. I wish I could tell those young girls that the people who attacked them are an aberration, but I'm not sure I could say that to them any more and still be honest. There are many, many people now who love to hate. In New York recently, 2 Muslim men were beaten with sticks in the street by a 15-strong gang wearing balaclavas. Police say it's the latest in a series of race hate crimes. There's been a wave of attacks against mosques across Britain. The broadcaster Sangeeta Maiska has spoken of the death threat she faces online. One on Instagram read, "I would love to skip rope with your intestines. You are an FC. I will enjoy this. I doubt you will." In Belfast, a racist gang surrounded a car at a retail park trying to get at the occupants inside. A black child was filmed whilst being punched and made to kiss the filthy boots of his attacker in Carlisle. 2 Sikh taxi drivers were attacked by a gang in Wolverhampton. One in his 70s suffered 2 broken ribs. Parents in Scotland are now reporting that they've started moving their kids from school to school because of racist abuse. Should I go on? I could go on. and on and on. Or are you sick to your stomach that this is happening in our society, on our streets, to our friends, to our neighbours, to their children? I'm not sure where our country is headed at the moment. We once thought naively that hate was consigned to the squalid online platforms run by dangerous men like Elon Musk. No longer. Hate is alive and well in the real world, and it is in all our neighbourhoods now. I have no grand solution to what's happened to us. In terms of our political leaders, they need to fix the ruined society they've created, so the worst of us do not take their rage out on the innocent among us. And they need to stop fomenting hatred and bigotry. But I have a feeling that these days that's too much to ask of most of them. I reckon this comes down to us, the ordinary people. Is it too trite to suggest that if we act with decency, if we speak with decency, if we challenge cruelty and bigotry, that perhaps this will ripple through society, that one person alone changes nothing, but millions change everything? I fear, though, that it is indeed too trite. My greatest fear is that what's happening has only begun, and that it will not be over until some terrible fever breaks on the body of this world we've created. By then, though, who knows how many little girls on streets that once rang with laughter will have had their innocence assaulted in ways we cannot yet comprehend. That article was by Neil Mackay. This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 16th of September 2025, from the Voices section. The hatred of Charlie Kirk is driving decent people to Nigel Farage. This article is by Kevin McKenna. The backlash against those exulting in Charlie Kirk's murder and the multitudes who gathered in London on Saturday have unnerved the left. To what extent, though, has their own illiberal conduct fueled this? Very few people, I thought, would have disagreed that the cold-blooded murder of Charlie Kirk was an act of evil. The footage of this young American's final moments will never not be shocking. Almost as ugly, though, have been some reactions to his assassination. These ranged from the infantile callousness of violence begets violence to something much more inhuman and pitiless, the unalloyed glee with which many people greeted the news of his murder. Nor was this the inchoate ramblings of a marginalized white underclass, these being the sort of people that the new regressive left glory in baiting. They came from well-known authors, singers, academics, teachers, public sector officials, and students. In seeking to justify their responses, many of them sought to portray Charlie Kirk as an online thug who had urged his followers to be violent towards gay and transgender people. A trawl through Mr. Kirk's podcasts, debates, and speeches showed that he had said nothing of the sort. Indeed, he'd sought to convey his views about the reality of sex and the traditional Christian approach to the sacrament of marriage with clarity. Those personalities with book sales and recording deals to protect began backtracking when it dawned on them that they'd misjudged the public mood. After their researchers and publicity agents had informed them that Mr. Kirk's views were not, to many people's minds, extreme, they sought to minimize the damage. For some, it may be too late. although my own view is that a sincere apology, properly expressed, should be accepted. Very few of us are entirely pure of heart and mind when expressing deeply held convictions, nor always checked that our sources were reliable. Only people who think they are immune from consequences behave like this. In their reality, it's normal to threaten those with opposing views, to have them cancelled, and to cause fear and alarm for them and their families. This dystopia is reinforced by the authorities in college campuses and public sector executives. Riches and social preferment come to those who police it. In Scotland, the governing class and the national police force decree this dogma and undermine those who question it. You're tempted to add a wretched codicil when expressing sympathy for those with whom you disagree on politics and cultural issues. You convince yourself that you must first apologize for sparing a thought for them, lest you be accused of being an extremist or a social delinquent. I'd imagine Mr. Kirk would think me deluded in my desire to nationalize all means of production, tax the rich to within an inch of their third homes, dismantle NATO, jettison the nukes and welcome all refugees and asylum seekers with open arms. On the binary reality of sex and my church's teaching about the sanctity of all human life, I'm probably with Charlie Kirk. Once this would have been regarded as the hallmark of a mature liberal democracy, reinforced by tolerance of other people's sincerely held and legally protected beliefs. Modern Scotland, though, is not a liberal democracy. Rather, it has regressed to a medieval and reactionary version of itself. We've not yet reached the stage, thank God, where anyone daring publicly to align with beliefs similar to Mr. Kirk's will meet with a bloody execution. And yet, when you see politicians gathered near placards urging the decapitation of gender-critical feminists and lesbians, you begin to harbour fears about where this might end. And when we have a much-admired First Minister who refused point-blank to support a female colleague who had been the subject of multiple violent sexual threats for her gender-critical views, you find yourself asking how we got here. The raw and implacable hatred, and that is what it is, to which J.K. Rowling is subject each day, exists in the same terrain as that which greeted the death of Charlie Kirk and which probably emboldened his killer. They have convinced themselves to hate the very idea of Miss Rowling, breathing the same air as them. The public backlash, especially in the US, targeting those foolish people who publicly cheered the murder of Charlie Kirk and made false accusations against him, has been swift and ruthless. Many good people who made bad errors of judgment have been sacked or suspended by employers fearful of cancelled contracts. This makes me queasy, as it bears the imprint of the sort of reactionary authoritarianism favoured by the Scottish Government and many of our public institutions. Yet, nor can you escape a feeling of schadenfreude. In Scotland and the US, most especially in civic government, academia and the arts, those who may be fearful of losing their jobs for glorifying the slaying of Charlie Kirk think nothing of cancelling the employment of women with gender realist beliefs and destroying their careers. We have a political party, the Scottish Greens, who have actively banned people who think sex is real and immutable from joining or remaining in the party. This can only happen when you know you can become an MSP without actually having to win an election. If the Greens do get into government once more to shore up an independence vote, then Scotland will be partly ruled by people who have publicly denounced a majority of the electorate who believe that sex is real. The real-world consequences arising from the state's curfews on speech and thought were alarmingly evident on the streets of central London on Saturday, when more than 150,000 people gathered under banners proclaiming British unity. If millions of people have become so sickened by the totalitarian and reactionary instincts of Labour, the SNP, and the trade unions, that they believe they're better off with Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson, then we're in a wretched place. The fraudulent and affluent left, including a trade union movement led in Scotland by a property tycoon, brought these people onto the streets. That article was by Kevin McKenna.
From the Herald Scotland, Tuesday the 16th of September 2025, from the sports section. Russell Martin and the first time I saw Ibrox vote with their feet, by Archie McPherson. The end is nigh. These words that day were unavoidable, or so it seemed, as I witnessed massive rebellion at Ibrox for the first time. It was the age when we simply called the man in the Aberdeen dugout Fergie. And the other was the iconic figure of John Gregg, the highly and rightfully respected figure who, as a player, consistently brought DD inspiration to his side through the years. And, in adversity, it was more like the very Dunkirk spirit he was summoning up. But in that game in September 1983, Aberdeen scored in the 71st and 73rd minute to put the winning of the game, by that score, beyond doubt. It was the netting of the second that provoked a sight that for the first time made the remaining football seem like a game of patacake. For, in the recently built Copland Road stand, thousands of the punters rose from their seats and began to stream for the exits, having clearly had enough of the current failures of that side. A display of disgust has little volume, so I recall that as a movement of mild bewilderment, rather than the bitter anger recently displayed in the same stand. All I could find myself saying, as they showed their backs to the cameras and their posteriors to the great man's future at the club, and to players in blue like McCoist and Cooper, was that they were voting with their feet, like I was recognising a spontaneous element of democracy within a sport that seemed too often to encourage images of an autocratic chairman surrounded by lackeys. I then used the nigh sentence. It seemed logical. But it did not go down well with the Rangers manager, who kept me at arm's length from then on to his departure in 1984. At the heart of that rebellion, though, was regret. Its ambivalence was simply having to grasp the hurtful reality that a favourite son, the greatest ever Ranger, finally wasn't up to the managerial task. It's worth bearing in mind, for he won honours, in that role, 2 Scottish Cups and 2 Scottish League Cups. Not enough though. Not when Fergie was pushing him around and about to win the league by the end of that season. So the John Gregg story, with its theme of relentless demands at that institution, ought to have been the bedtime reading for Russell Martin and any of the faceless ones who give him the key to the door, before they come to an understanding of what the Ibrox task would be all about. Instead, they look as if they have been turning the pages of Agatha Christie, for they have shrouded the club in mystery, with their naive optimism now morbidly on its back, and the Copland Road stand and all, needed no Hercule Poirot to work out who's to blame. They would have learned from a man who seemed to be as durable as government itself, that there is an historic nexus between 2 clubs in that same city that produces the shared assumption that they are there to win everything, the lot, both of them with habitual expectations. Such hubris is, of course, sourced in their achievements, particularly for Celtic in recent times. The fact that they both have had weak periods where other clubs have shone has to be balanced against their powers of recovery through the years. So the recent ascension of Hearts, refreshing as it is to jaded eyes like mine, is also accompanied by an unavoidable cynicism that makes you wonder how long they will endure in that lofty role as you look at the history books. Although they seemed well financed in their current mode, are guided by a manager who seems like a skilled guide taking them through hostile territory. The importance of that managerial role is why the Union Bears are issuing statements about Martin, which echo the words of those posters in the Old West demanding to know the whereabouts of outlaw Billy the Kid. And why, even though Celtic topped the league and have been winning leagues yawningly over the years, a group of their supporters protested about the board last Saturday at Killie, with late arrivals at least involuntary method. Yes, they have entirely different causes for alarm. Rangers are in chaos. Celtic are out of the Champions League and have wealths that apparently would have kept them there where they feel they rightly belong. But essentially, they harbour the same basic question. What's going on? Now I have watched Old Firm managers come and go through the years for a variety of reasons, but terracing attitudes and cabals of sorts within the clubs were never intimately bound together. So really nothing much has changed. Indeed, perhaps the greatest of all the Old Firm managers, Jock Stein, summed up the relevance of supporters after he left Celtic, reluctantly, as a saddened man. He felt that his relevance in their history had been laid conveniently aside and treated by some within the club as if he had been no more than the man who looked after the team's kit. His lifelong friend Tony McGuinness told me, word for word, in later years, what Stein had said to him after his departure from Celtic Park. If the supporters knew how I had been treated, they would have burned the place down. That is exactly how many of the Rangers support could feel at the moment about their club. Hibs, in a metaphorical sense, could do that for them this weekend. And that article was written by Archie McPherson and read by Ian McKenna.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Q and Review and to tell your friends about our service.